A woman called for you last night. She was looking for her daughter, a friend of yours. Corey, Callie...
Carolyn. We aren't really friends anymore.
I put more of these up every day.
Well, honey, can you help me with this? I'm making a flyer for that missing girl. I saw the ones her mother's been putting up and they're hideous.
You spelled her name wrong.
Oh. Well, I'm not gonna start over now. I worked really hard on this.
I thought your dad lost his job.
What do you do all day anyway? Oh, honey, aren't you gonna eat?
Of course not.
If you need some extra money, you could probably sell my meds to your friends at school.
As most of you know, Carolyn Harper's been missing since Friday night.
If you know anything, let us know immediately.
For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had, better by far that you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad.
Can you feel that?
I need to know there's a way out of this place.
311. How may I help you?
What do you think is going on here?
It will almost kill you, but you will not die from this.
You were warned.
I will rise. If only. Tell me where she is! To hold you down.
Towards performance or something, and I feel like my classes were always more heavy toward, you know, toward video, for instance, because that's what I was doing.
So how did you become a video artist? What were your first video art pieces that you consider, okay, this was video art? Or when did you decide to become a video artist? Because I read that you started working with other video artists, like Sadie Benning, for example. You were like good friends of hers, but you were also in one of her films. Or in one of, can you tell us a bit about that experience of being an art student?
So when I was a younger person and up through high school, I was a dancer. I was a ballet dancer. And so when I went to university for my undergrad, I took a class in the sculpture department, in the art department, just a regular sculpture class. I thought perhaps the art students I would find my friends in the art department, you know? And I did a terrible job in that class. I nearly failed that class. But the instructor said to me that the next semester, there was a woman named Linda Montano. She's an American sort of performance artist. She's still living and working. And he said she was coming the next semester as a visiting faculty to teach another kind of a time-based expanded arts, had a very strange title. And he said, I know you were a dancer. Maybe this would be something that would be interesting to you.
How old were you?
Oh, I mean, 17 or 18, like quite young. And so I took the class, and it was indeed a kind of performance art class, which I was not so interested in, but it was related to my life as a dancer. But we had to videotape the performances, you know, with like a giant old analog, you know, like VHS camera or something. And that was, picking up that camera for the first time was like recovering a phantom limb. Do you know this this term, right? It's like it's finding something that is like this part of your body that you didn't know existed, or was missing. Yeah, was missing, exactly. And then that's all I did. I never did anything else. I took some then some film classes in the film program that was a very small film program, very much dominated by, you know, men. I was the only woman in my class, which was a struggle, you know, because of my, you know, they sort of drowned out my voice, which is why I bought a video camera. I bought a little tiny Nikon video camera, not a film camera, a video camera, because I knew that it's still the case, right? Like I could put the video camera, it was so small, I could put it in my backpack, I could bring it out, I could just take a lampshade off the light and I have light, I could be in front of the camera, I was editing, I was doing everything. And so, and this was in Ohio, you know, and
where
so
were you born?
I was born in the middle of Ohio. I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
In Columbus, okay, because somewhere I read Hammond and I said, no, Columbus. I remember you saying
and that's where I live right now. I live right just outside of Chicago in the northwest tip of Indiana. But then I was looking around for programs, for graduate programs. And the School of the Art Institute, as you know, at that time, it had a video program. It wasn't yet part of the film program. Now it's film, video, new media. It's this giant thing. But I really wanted a video program. I really loved the medium of video in specific. And I also needed a way to get out of Ohio. You know, I'm the youngest of 5 children, and you know, one of two girls. My mother, I think the only way my mother was going to let me leave, you know, the state was if I said, "What? But I'm going to grad school. I'm going to graduate school." You know.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
and
then your upbringing. Sorry, to interrupt, but your upbringing. I don't want to move on. Your upbringing. You were very Catholic school, like that sort of thing, right? Like you even wanted to become a nun. So so that's how Catholic.
Well, it wasn't so much. Yeah, I mean, I was. My mother was slightly less dogmatic by the time that I came along, but it was still. My father had no religion, but my mother was quite Catholic. When I was a teenager, I was really. I liked the idea of a place of solitude with a lot of other women. That felt like nuns in a way seemed like superheroes at some point, you know, that they were this group of women all together who had this sort of amazing uniform. You know, I wasn't thinking about the religious implications. I was just thinking how cool it would be to you know, be secluded with a bunch of other, you know, radical women who had decided to remove themselves from society. I just thought that was, you know, that would be so cool. And I think it was also at a time when I was a teenager and feeling very, you know, apprehensive about just, you know, being a teenage girl. And it also seemed like, you know, wearing something that covered up my whole body, you know, was also very interesting to me.
Important.
So yeah,
but the tattoos and all that, that's, well, we can talk about that, but that's sort of a form of also covering, you know? Of writing on top, or like signifying and covering with all these signifiers, because I'm saying your characters are all about that, I think. But anyway, you can talk about that later on, please. But we were talking about your process of moving to art school. So you arrived to Chicago, and what happens? I mean, why not New York? Why Chicago?
Well, I'll tell you specifically. I wanted a video program, and the School of the Art Institute had this video program, and I was working in Columbus, Ohio, at a contemporary art museum. It still exists. It's called the Wexner Center for the Arts. It's a very interesting, very interesting contemporary art facility, and their film and video program, the film and videos they would show in the theater or in the galleries, they were all coming, most of them, a lot of them were coming from this place called the Video Data Bank. So I was like, what is this Video Data Bank? You know,
I must go there and visit.
Really, exactly. And so that's exactly what I did. The minute I landed in Chicago, I put all my stuff down and I went directly to the Video Data Bank. And I said, I'm a graduate student starting in 2 weeks. Do you need a graduate student worker? I will do anything. And they said, yeah, we do need a grad student worker. So, you know, like fill out an application or something. Anyway, I got the job, and at that time also, the woman who was the director of the video data bank said, you know, Sadie Benning is looking for a roommate. If you need a roommate. We didn't end up being roommates, but she was also one of, or they, now Sadie goes by they, that's their pronoun. But we didn't end up being roommates, but we ended up being, Sadie was one of the very first people that I met in Chicago. And we, and I didn't really even know at the time how famous Sadie was, you know, or, you know, the provenance that she had in the video art world. You know, I just thought that Sadie was cool, you know, and then I finished my, you know, my MFA there, and, you know, made some projects that people ended up liking. I was very lucky to do that. And then I stayed working at the video data bank for 2 more years. Yeah.
Okay. So it was videotapes and all these authors, because I was going to ask you, how did you become an author? I mean, because that's like how powerful your voice has become, you know?
Well, I think I think it was about, and if anything is lost in translation, I talk fast so I can go back. But I think it had to do with being a girl, and like the only girl, young woman in my film school classes, and then buying this video camera and just saying, like, fuck it, I'm going to do it by myself. You know, I mean, I just didn't want to have to present, you know, my project, you know, to this group of guys who, you know, at that time were only interested in making their own projects. I just didn't want to I wanted to bypass the whole system. And so I taught myself how to operate the camera. I taught myself how to edit, you know, to do sound mixing. I mean, and I was in front of the camera performing everything, you know? Yes. But it was also a time when, you know, the term video art, I mean, you could do that. You could kind of make everything and you could just send it out into the world, you know? So I really it wasn't necessarily that I always wanted to do it all by myself, because it was hard work to do it all by myself, but I felt like I needed autonomy in terms of my ideas, in that conventional film school model, you know, I just felt like it was not going to be supportive of the ideas that I had. So I think it was just the you know, buying my own camera and then making my own projects, and then making a lot of projects, and then you just become more confident, right, in what you can do, and you know you can do it, so that when someone else comes along and says, like, you know, I can help you do it, you know, you can either let them help you because you trust them and you know that they support your ideas, or you say, forget it, I don't need your help, I can do it myself. I mean, you know, and I didn't do that all by myself. There were many people who helped me do that, but we were all part of, you know, the same goal for that project.
And who were the feminists or the video artists who were your references? Not only feminists, but I mean, like, artists who inspire you and that you were like, great work, or because of...
Well, I remember very early on when I was an undergrad seeing the films of Maya Deren.
Maya Deren, of course.
Yes, yeah. Who also, here, I'll show you something.
Oh, Maya Deren is amazing.
Here's my Maya Deren doll that someone made for me. There she is.
Wow, incredible.
I'll put her here. I'll put her here for us to, I'll move her over a little bit there. Yeah, so I remember seeing those beautiful, and she was a dancer. She was a dancer who had become a filmmaker. And I remember watching, you know, Atland, Meshes of the Afternoon. I mean, they are available on YouTube. You can find them on YouTube. And just being, and the music is so interesting. And she was making these films in a kind of surrealist lens, you know, I knew that she was the author of it. She was the performer in front of the camera, but she was the director, and she was working really closely with the composer. So I remember seeing her work as an undergrad and being really enamored with her work. And then I remember my video teacher as an undergrad who really loved George Kuchar.
Ah, okay. The
You know?
Weather Diaries.
The Weather Diaries. Like very, very different from Maya Deren, but also someone who, you know, he was known for making videos where he's like, before there was a word selfie, right, was always kind of shooting himself with this little camera, and, you know, also very much in auteur. He had made some interesting kind of underground films with his brother Mike. And I thought that his work was just felt really personal and kind of idiosyncratic.
Yes.
And funny
and
absurd.
A little
and absurd, you know, and also a little, you know, a little racy. I mean, he was a gay man who was also, you know, would sort of deal with his sexuality in a very funny, unexpected way. And then when I got to the video data bank, you know, I remember seeing, well, and also going back to the woman who was that woman at Ohio State, Linda Montano, you know, she has made some beautiful video art. Maybe you'll recall there was a video she made called Mitchell's Death, where she's like, it's this beautiful video. It's black and white. It was made in maybe the early 70s. I'll put this in here too.
What's her name?
Her name is Linda Montano.
Linda Montano. Okay.
And she, for instance, in the 80s, she did a year-long performance with a Chinese Chinese artist, where they stayed tied together by this length of rope.
Marina Abramovich?
No.
But
the guy,
so,
his name is I mean, his last name is this, like something like that. I'll find it.
You mean that's, you mean someone did that before Marina Abramovich?
Yeah.
So she was the one who did the original performance.
I'll find this. Hold on. Let me find this. I love a chat. Now we can all just.
Yes. Of course. Yes. The guy who did the year-long performance. Yes. Yeah, we've seen that at the clock piece.
Yep. She did. So let's see. Oh, here we go. So here's this one. I'll just put this in the chat too. Yeah. So this is this woman who came to Columbus, Ohio. If you open that one up, and she was my very first video teacher at Ohio State as an undergrad. And she has a lot of videos that are also in the video data bank. There's a beautiful one called Mitchell's Death, where it's just a very close-up video of her face, where she has these acupuncture needles in her face, and she's in this very kind of chanting way, hearing about the death of her husband, her ex-husband. So I didn't know it, you know, but I thought, like so many students do, that she was just this interesting woman who was coming to teach with us. And it wasn't until a little later on that I thought, oh my gosh, I had this whole semester with this woman who is a very, you know,
important,
very important,
influential.
Yeah. And she's still, you know, alive and working. She's in upstate New York. So when I got to the video data bank, I mean, the thing that helped me the most when I was in graduate school was actually just watching, you know, it wasn't the conversations I had with my advisors, you know, unfortunately it was just watching. I would just take videos home every night. You know, I was watching videos constantly, just astonished at I mean, not only the early stuff that men were making, Vito Acconci and Bruce Nauman and, you know, Paul McCarthy, all of this really interesting, you know, early video art from the guys, but, you know, Martha Rossler and Linda Benglis, and, you know, of course that leads you to Ana Mendieta. I mean, it's like just this whole, you know, range of women who were making very interesting kind of performance-based video work in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. that still is so radical, you know. I mean, if you look at any of these, you know, it's yeah, to me that early video artwork is still so
Super
radical,
influential.
super influential, so important.
So
yeah.
Okay, so we have those like important male names, authors were like, you know, very important for the video art, and there was like a very close relationship between, of course, video art and performance that it started in Fluxus, right? Fluxus,
yeah, I think
the
so.
Fluxus
Yeah.
movement in the 60s. It was the first time that they were documenting these performances and happenings, you know, with the video camera and Namjoon Paik doing this documentations with musical instruments and being super irreverent, you know,
and also you know, those very early Sony Portapak cameras that the artists were using, you know, also young journalists were using them, you know, young like students who were protesting Vietnam, you know, who were protesting the first, you know, Women's March on Washington, who were protesting you know, groups of indigenous activists who were taking over Plymouth Rock, you know, the video data bank also has all of that footage of these very early sit-ins, protests, civil rights movements from, you know, young African Americans, you know, like young Latinx activists, women, I mean, on and on, the first sort of gay rights, you know, March on Washington. And it's just this beautiful, you know, raw footage, because it was the first time in around the mid 60s when the average citizen, a person could have access to a video camera, you know? So that Sony Portapak, it went into the hands of artists who did all sorts of cool things. And then it went into the hands of activists who also did a bunch of cool stuff.
Exactly. So was your work always feminist? I mean, is there always, because I know now that I see it, I am like, yes, of course, there's always like this underline of feminism, but it's not so obvious. It's not super obvious. I think that what you do best is like how you just sort of like talk about something, but without being super obvious. I mean, that's kind of how I read your feminism. And I don't know, of course, it's super in your face for other people, but for me, it's like super elegant. I don't know why.
Well, I think it started off, I didn't start off thinking.
So how did you become a feminist? Sorry.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a matriarchy, you know, I mean, my parents were married until my father died, you know, 4 years ago, but my mom was the boss of the house, you know, I mean, maybe many of your students can relate to that. You know, it's like, really, you know, I mean, I feel like even if the mother is not the loudest one in the house, it's really the, you know, so many households really are matriarchies.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so, right,
the irony.
And so if you're paying attention, you know, then you can't help but to understand how much authority, you know, even if you're if you're from a child, how much authority your mother has, you know, in your household. And so I, you know, even though my mother didn't, you know, she didn't go to college and she worked from home, or she worked, she didn't have a career. She worked in the house and she cleaned houses. I mean, she did a lot of like domestic labor outside of the house.
She was a housewife.
Yeah, she was a housewife and mother, but she also did work outside of the house, but like literally cleaning other people's houses too. So she was, because she didn't have a college education, but she wanted to bring more money into the household. So she was doing, or she would, she was a seamstress. So she would make, you know, clothes for people. She was really good at making, you know, like wedding dresses, really elaborate things. So she always wanted to work, you know, she wanted to contribute financially, but she did what she could, which was also remarkable. And she's still living, she's 89, and she still is sewing and knitting, but now she lets me clean her house. She doesn't, you know, but I always knew that I had this, you know, my mother now says that she's a feminist. She didn't necessarily say that she was a feminist when we were growing up, but I knew that I knew that she supported whatever I wanted to do. And that my wants were not diminished by what my brothers wanted to do. and my brothers went to college, and she wanted me and my sister to go to college, which we did. And my brothers were encouraged to follow their dreams. And, you know, she encouraged myself and my sister to follow our dreams. You know, I never felt like in the household, my brothers got to do things that me and my sister didn't get to do. And that was just like an automatic thing. So when it's the first time that I heard, you know, that someone said, well, you can't do that, you know, you're a girl, or you shouldn't do that because you're a girl, I was like, it was just a shock to me that would be
but you were also like a swimmer, you were dancer, swimmer, I mean, you were like talented, no, like a leader sort of, kind of, or no? No,
I mean, I liked dancing much more than I liked swimming. I think swimming was it was like my mother was also a swimming coach outside, or swimming teacher, you know, so it was something that everyone did. I liked dancing better than swimming.
And you were a model. I mean, like you would do all this other roles, like you worked in advertising, right? So you weren't shy. I mean, you were like a strong character.
Yeah, but I think that has a lot to do with, you know, if you're, I mean, now that I'm a mother, you know, it's like
mother of three.
A mother of three.
They're gorgeous. I mean, like I follow their posts.
Here's one of them, and he's in 3rd grade right now. This is what school looks like.
Hi. He's so gorgeous. I mean, I cannot, you know, not be moved.
The other two, the older two, have gone back to school in person just every other day. So they're in an in-person school right now, but just that started just this week. Up to this week, they were all here at home, huddled around me.
And they also act. And they also act.
They do, but I don't think that they necessarily like to act. I think I've made them be in my movies. But as a mother now, you know, and I think also, you know this as a teacher, it's like the most important thing that you can do, you know, as a teacher or a mother, like as a mentor, right, is to encourage that kind of autonomy and encourage that confidence, you know? I mean, I just think it's the most
difficult thing.
It's
to be confident.
It's so hard.
Because self-doubt is more common than you think, right? I mean, and there's a lot of, I mean, like sometimes you can become your worst enemy. Like if you don't believe in yourself, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but nothing, you know, it's super real. I mean, like, so that's why I'm asking this feminism. I mean, it's super difficult to be a feminist or an outspoken feminist here in Colombia, for example, because people, I mean, it's a very machista culture, you know, and for example, mass media is very stereotypical. Like there's a lot of soap operas, and if a woman has like a protagonist role or something, they're probably, you know, a model, or, you know, the television presenter is like super voluptuous with all these costumes and exaggerations of her, you know, femininity, etc. And she's super using a lot of makeup, etc. So there's a lot of these stereotypes, and so it's difficult to be an artist that sort of deals with feminism, but in such a way that you sort of get the message out there, but people don't get offended or don't make you even more invisible or even make fun of you, sort of. So that's how do you deal with that? I mean,
well, I think it's important to understand, or from my perspective, my feminism is about empowering everybody, you know? I mean, I think that, you know, men don't have power unless women have power, you know? And so, or it's not, you know, it's really not equal for men unless it's equal for women. So, you know, and you can be this beautiful, voluptuous, love makeup and be a feminist. Like those things don't cancel each other out. You know, there's a whole spectrum of. I mean, right now I'm looking very not glamorous because I'm working.
You're gorgeous all the time.
I'm working from home, you know. But
that's how I remember you, like this wonderful feminist, beautiful, you know, gorgeous presence. Super intimidating, of course, for men too.
Which is now why I think my karma is that I have 3 sons, so I have to I'm dealing with you know, young manhood, which I really love. It feels really special to watch these young men, you know, navigate the world, and they're all very, very different, and they benefit from, you know, from my feminism. They benefit from my want for basic human equality. You know, that's how I think about feminism, that it's about human equality. It's not about someone being better, getting more. And feminism is not about women dominating men at all. It's really about, you know, human equality. And you think that it's, you know, it's over or it's done, but it's not done. I mean, you know, I'm sure, you know, it's like, if anyone is paying attention to the horrible
what's happening,
politics that are happening
you, like,
in the United States, you know, it's crazy. It's crazy. Well, right now we feel like our president is on a lot of steroids. He's, do you know, I mean, really, he's being extra aggressive with his tweeting, and he's being very aggressive in some of these weird videotaped, prior videotaped messages. It's so strange.
Like a la Korean dictator.
Very much so. Very much so.
Like a la North Korean dictator.
Absolutely. But he's someone who's, you know, we are dealing with a president who's absolutely not interested in, you know, aspects of equality, very much wants to uphold some, like, a hierarchy. And, you know, and I just think that, you know, looking at how also what's happened with the social uprising around, you know, after the murder of George Floyd and then the other, you know, and the subsequent fallout of Breonna Taylor. I mean, I'm sorry if those feel like kind of more, if that's not something that anyone's paying attention to. I understand it.
We pay attention to that. And because here it's happening, we kind of mimic that, you know, I don't know why. But all of a sudden here, the police is also abusing power, you know. There's like the SMAD, which is like this military section of the police force. And they are enforcing law, like in the protests and everything, even killing people. We are also having that, you know, phenomenon. So it's like becoming universal.
Right. And so just watching that kind of, you know, social uprising, watching, you know, citizens go to the streets to just ask for basic, you know, basic human needs. You know, I mean, in Flint, Michigan, they're still dealing with a horrible water supply. I mean, so, you know, we go on and on. So I think that, you know, for me, it's you know, like my brand of feminism and amplifying certain voices is a part of just wanting to advocate for, you know, the basics of you know, human equality.
Yes.
And I also want to make films, though, that are entertaining. You know, I don't make documentaries.
But some are beautiful. Some, I mean, like, they're not entertaining, but they're beautiful, and they are. I think they're innovative in the sense that they sort of talk about new subjectivities, and because we've been sort of, for example, interested in that in autoethnography, and I think that your films are very ethnographic, but at the same time so multiple, you know. So that's fascinating. How do you research your characters? Because they're so different from each other, yet how do you do that? I mean, do you break down trauma into characters? Because I was thinking because trauma is like your big thing, right? Trauma. And so
well, I was thinking, you know, I probably should do more. I should probably do more research than I actually do. But I, you know, I mean, I do a lot of imagine, you know, I do a lot of imagination, and maybe that sounds sort of irresponsible, but, you know, I mean, thinking about when I was making Knives and Skin, writing the characters for Knives and Skin, which the themes of Knives and Skin are based on
fiction,
a bunch of short films. It's fictional, totally fictional, but also based on some short films that I had made earlier. So there's a short film, A Million Miles Away, Blood Below the Skin. You know, I had made some short films to kind of test out some of these ideas. And, you know, I had to wonder how a mother of a teenage girl would respond if that girl went missing, you know? And I think you can do that without being a mother, but you really have to kind of, it's like meditation, you know, you have to really like meditate on who your character is. And I'm not only just writing adult women, you know, who are mothers, I'm writing men and I'm writing teenagers. And I'm writing people who are not white, you know, also. So you know, you have to like,
because that's reality. I mean, you all the time encounter diversity in everyday life. I mean, life is not like nuns, you know, precisely, but it's like more diverse and more multiple. And of course, if you add to that imagination, sorry, then, I mean, it's infinite.
And it's like being a detective, you know, I mean, it's like you ask questions. Who is this character? Who is this person? You know, where did they grow up? I mean, you know, how did they go to school? What was their home life? When was their birthday? What foods do they like? All of these, you know, you just are asking questions about the character and that you are also answering because you're building the character, you know? So that's how I start off. I end up writing lots and lots of, I keep lots of notebooks, little notebooks like this everywhere, you know? So I'm always writing notes. If I'm developing a script, you know, I'm writing lots and lots of notes about who those characters are. And, you know, and then you have this other layer of how they interact with the other characters and
how they look.
Yeah. I mean, and I think because I went to, you know, I went to art school really for filmmaking. You know, I didn't go, I mean, even when I was an undergrad, it wasn't a proper film school experience. You know, it was more like this kind of video performance classes in the art department. And then even for graduate school, like we were saying at the School of the Art Institute, as you know, it's more of an art school than a film school. So I was making film and video work, but in an art school context. And so, my films are always, always very interested in the visual language of the films, you know, and what can be told through costumes, what can be told through makeup, what can be told through the color of the lighting.
And that's what I mean when I say it's not so obvious, but you know, that like everything is so like subtextual, metaphorical, etc. It's not like this is feminist, or you know, you're not trying to pontificate or teach us lessons on feminism, but in a way you're transforming your audience, no? And that's why I thought of, and I said, no, I must, you know, invite Jennifer, because I think that your feminism does that. It sort of reaches out, you know, to all audiences, including males, females, blah blah blah. So that's what I meant when I said that it wasn't so obvious. Because
I don't want to alienate anyone in my films. I know that my films are not for everyone. I know there are a lot of people who don't get them.
Like them, or
it's fine.
Like them or whatever.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I don't ever set out. I mean, the whole, I mean, for me, being a filmmaker is like about like opening my heart and trying to connect with an audience. And so, but I know that that's not possible with every person in every film, but I never set out to alienate anyone. I never set out to I always want my films to reach as wide an audience as possible, you know. And
but at the same time, Jennifer, you don't try to please everyone, you know.
No, right.
which is kind of what I like, because you're not like, okay, I'm gonna make a film that everyone's going to agree with and everyone's going to find interesting or deep or whatever. You do your own thing, your own story, your own idiosyncrasy. So that's great, you know. You've been developing this language, this particular author, you know, figure. I mean, you're an author. So,
but that's why I think that's why I've made a lot of short films. Exactly, because you know, when you start making longer films that cost more money, that take more time, then other people are invested in that process. And oftentimes other people actually are invested in saying, you have to please everybody. And then, you know, the story can just get lost and murky and dumbed down, you know? So I've been able to still on my own terms, make a lot of short films that have done really well, actually much better outside of the US, like literally in Canada,
in France,
Europe,
in Germany,
in South America. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
And so I think it's...
No, in the US you were very well known, I mean, like as a video artist.
Yeah.
The short films and your performances with White Trash Girl became iconic, you know, like for us too, I mean, like for me, because in Colombia we have very little video art, sort of, because there's like there's this like American sort of history of video art, you know. There's also like Eurocentral video art history, but and there's also like a South American, but okay, like write a global video art history, that's more complicated because you have to simultaneously, you know, take a look at these different art histories, you know, happening at the same time, and you know, see through different lenses and perspectives. And of course you have the feminist perspective and you can go there, but that would, you know, take out other histories that are also important, relevant, and are related. So it's super complex.
There's some interesting, or maybe it's not so much as it was, but you know, for a long time, like in Brazil, right, there was like a lot of kind of video art coming out of Brazil, and like there was a big like Video Brazil, like there was a big like a video art festival. I mean, maybe it doesn't exist anymore, but and there's some great, you know, like film festivals that have a lot of you know, still have a lot of interesting experimental experimental elements and whatnot.
No, and it's very
you know, but the US, you know, what's still happening in terms of kind of US mainstream filmmaking is, you know, like this model where you make one short film and then you're expected to only make feature-length films, and you know, there's still this like big gap between the amount of films that get made by men every year from studios and the amount of films that get made by, you know, women every year. So, but the past two films that I've made, the feature-length films, Signature Move, which came out in 2017, which I directed, but I didn't write it. And that's a Chicago film that's actually in English and in Urdu, which is the language of Pakistan, and in Spanish, actually, because one of the characters is Mexican. And that was a very independent film that we had a lot of creative freedom around, which was really fun to make. And then even Knives and Skin, I mean, it was a bigger budget, the biggest budget I've ever worked with, but I still had total creative freedom over that film.
But control? Did you
total
feel
control?
In control?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the project that I'm working on right now, that's kind of in a kind of pre-production, whatever that means, during a kind of a global health crisis, is Perpetrator, exactly. And I have also right now control over that too. And I've got this great producing team that's this company called 30 West that made this film that came out a couple of years ago called I, Tanya. And then they did this really good Karen Kusama film called Destroyer. They've done some very interesting films. And then there's another company that's helping called Divide and Conquer. And they've done some very interesting genre films lately. They did this cool film last year called The Wind, and another kind of cam girl genre called Cam, and Black Christmas. They did the remake of Black Christmas last year, like a really kind of a cool all girl, just a kind of a Halloween movie, but it came out at Christmas, or a scary movie that came out at Christmas. And then a company that's based in Paris called What the Films, that does, that was the foreign sales agent for Knives and Skin. And so it's not a French film. It won't get French financing, but he's helping. You know, he's a French person based in Paris, but he's very connected to kind of global, you know, film production. And so with those three people, you know, they all kind of came to me and said, you're like, what do you want to work on next? And which is an incredible question to get asked. And it wasn't a rhetorical question, you know. I said, well, I want to do this kind of a coming of age, like kind of a cool shapeshifter story, you know, kind of a
horror feminist.
Yeah.
Is it like is horror, because there's this interesting intersection, right, between horror films and feminism, which I think I think this film is going to be like amazing. I mean, because I read sort of like this article. I was reading about it. So you are going to direct film, and you are also a screenwriter.
Yeah. And I'm going to put I'm going to put the lookbook in the chat for you guys.
Great.
So
so you already have your casting and everything. And I wanted to ask, because I read that you were going to shoot this film in the south of the United States, like very Mississippi, New Orleans, that sort of region.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about that? I mean, like, what are you?
So the film right now is set in New Orleans, but I was talking to one of the producers last night, and we think we'll shoot it in Savannah, Georgia, which is it's like a very Gothic city, a very old city, and maybe more accessible than New Orleans. And Georgia has a very good tax credit, you know, which is also oftentimes an incentive for where you want to shoot a film in the U.S. You can get money back from the state.
Yeah, we have a similar law here now. Like, yeah, it's interesting.
And so I wanted to shoot it, you know, it's a kind of a Gothic story. And so I wanted to shoot it someplace where the city itself, the architecture of the city, has a kind of oldness and a Gothic feeling to it. And there's not that many places in the U.S. that hold on to that. There's so many brand new cities, you know, in the U.S. But, you know, New Orleans, because of its relationship to, you know, to France, literally, you know, a lot of those southern states have this really interesting architecture
which is kind of, how is it? Is it colonial? I mean, is it like, does it have like certain colonial aspect to it?
Yes.
Yep. Because there's also like this wood and these like old big houses and this history of slavery, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
absolutely. And because of the, you know, in certain areas, because the water table is really high, all of the cemeteries are above ground. You know, if you think about the sort of some of the cemeteries in the South, especially in New Orleans, like all of the, it's like these big, like if you look up a New Orleans cemetery, you know, like everything is above ground, and it's just a very, it's like a city that sort of some of those cities can just hold magic, you know. So I wanted to, or they hold ghosts, you know, and so I wanted to shoot in a location that just felt like it sort of held magic and held, you know, ghosts, and held its own haunting, you know.
So that whole thing about magic realism, would you like to talk a bit about that? Because I think that perhaps that's what you mean. I mean, like there's a bit of phantasmagoria, ghost story, appearing and disappearing, which is another recurrent theme of yours. You know, like this disappearing power.
Well, I think I mean, that's such a good question. And I think at the end of the day, I just understand that cinema is artificial, you know, so you can do anything, you know, with it. It doesn't, why should it stay in the realm of the real? I mean, reality is so difficult, you know, it's like reality is so awful.
So awful and so difficult.
So if you can make cinema that embraces, you know, what is surreal or unreal or super real, hyper real, then that feels like a place that I like to explore, you know, and just imagining what kind of, I mean, I'm not a religious person, and I don't know that I would say that I'm like a spiritual person. Maybe I'm like a metaphysical person. Like I like thinking about, you know, things having aura, not just people, but you know, pets and your plants and
like animism.
Yeah, you know,
you know,
or like your favorite pair of shoes. Like when you wonder, like, why do I like these shoes so much? You know, maybe those shoes have like you and your shoes are connected through this, you know, through a kind of aura. So then I like to be able to show some of that on the screen and kind of like talk about, you know, the things around us having a kind of a protective energy. So yeah, you're scrolling through that presentation board.
So
and there's some other films that, you know, some things that you would
references. Please. Talk about your references. For example, Dario Argento.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like one inevitable reference when I saw Knives and Skin. I mean, that beautiful sequence in the swimming pool. I mean, how you lit that up and those reflections of the water, but at the same time, it's so artificial. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like taken to the extreme of being so artificial and so that you like.
It's more fun to light a scene that way, isn't it? I mean, and on some level, it's more fun to it's so dramatic and theatrical. I think that also goes back to my history as a dancer. You know, like that dance and being specifically a ballet dancer. You know, ballet is so dramatic, and it's these melodramatic, even not just dramatic, but melodramatic stories told to, you know, orchestral music in a theater with this beautiful lighting and costumes. And so, you know, that was my first experience as a storyteller, being a ballet dancer. So I also want to think about how you build the frame, the mise en scène, how you build that with like thinking of it in a theatrical way. And I even feel like I edit that way, or I like, you know, I've liked studying other filmmakers like Jacques Tati, you know, and the way that Jacques Tati uses
comedy,
but also like the framing, like it's choreographed, you know, it doesn't, it's not all about just
timing,
all the cuts,
but it's also timing and who comes into frame and
who
goes
comes
out of the frame.
what's happening in the back, and then what's happening in the front. Yeah,
exactly.
And there's a Thai or a Taiwanese director, Tsai Ming-Long, who does the same thing. He made The Hole, What Time Is It There, The River, these incredible films also that feel like they are borrowing from theater, you know, and the way that that's choreographed. So
artificial, like super intentional.
And so yeah, with Argento, I mean, I love the melodrama of the lighting, and you know, the how surreal it is. I mean, it goes back to my love of even, you know, the Maya Deren, talking about the kind of surreal elements and supernatural elements.
Yeah, and her interest in magic, and you remember that amazing documentary she did about the voodoo?
Yep.
You know, that she did in Haiti, and all this experience of the supernatural. I think it's something that you're very subtly touching in your last film. But so this new film, Perpetrator, you're going to, it's more, I mean, is it about like a she-wolf character or something, or
no? So she's a shapeshifter, but she is not.
What is shapeshifter? Is it like someone who transforms herself throughout?
Yep. And oftentimes a shapeshifter is considered like they can be like a werewolf or even a vampire. But her power is that she inherits from her mother, who inherited it from her mother. It's like a whole lineage, a matriarchy of shapeshifting women. But she inherits a kind of like super empathy. And so she can actually like become the other person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've been thinking, you know, I mean,
Great.
just over this, just over this 4 years in particular, under the current, you know, White House administration, I've been thinking a lot about the power of empathy, you know,
Yeah.
which is not just about like sympathy is being able to say, I have an idea of how you're feeling and I'm, that's a horrible thing, you know, but empathy, you know, is you're supposed to be able to actually feel what someone else is feeling. And so there's this whole, like, people who consider themselves actual empaths, it's related to like telekinesis or being psychic, you know. So there are some people who are like, there's no such thing as an empath, or like clairvoyancy, you know, it's kind of related to that kind of sort of
realm of
psychic abilities. Yeah.
So telepathy, that's something that, because we can see that like a record on another of your themes, right?
Yeah.
Like telepathy, but the invisible, but also telepathy, like this communication that is like super cryptic.
Yeah.
And it's like, so only you and I know this code. And it's like a mysterious code that we only know, you know. That's great. I mean,
and I have none of those abilities, I have to say, but I really, but I really love the idea that I try, you know, I'm literally the person who's always like, I'm going to send that person a message, you know, and then they just walk away. And I'm like, dang it. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to send that person a message, you know, but I like,
it's working.
You know, I mean, but I like to write that into my characters, you know, that, that you can connect with another human in a nonverbal way. I mean, it's like what falling in love is, right? Or it's like but being part of your community is, but I kind of push that. And so I wanted to write this character who was a teenage girl who when she turns 18, she inherits this ability, this kind of like super empathy. And you know, which is a hard thing for her to deal with, because of course she's at, you know, 17 turning 18. It's like she's a very self-absorbed person, you know, which I think is not uncommon for, you know, any teenager necessarily, to feel really like the world is very
authentic.
Right. And I mean, the script is finished and we've attached some cast already. And we
all American cast, or
so far so far it's
international.
No, so far it's an all American cast. And the Nick
is
Zinner,
it like new actors, sorry, or I mean like new talents, or
the woman who's my lead, so the woman who plays the teenager, her name is, actually I took it back, she's not American. The woman who is the lead, my lead character, is named Nell Tiger Free. And she's on, she was on, I'll write her name down. And there's a new episodic series on Apple TV that's directed or developed by M. Night Shyamalan. You know, this sort of guy who's done Signs and Sixth Sense and all. So it's called Servant. It's very good. I mean, I'm not sure if, you know, but it's called Servant. And it's really a very good series. And so she's the lead on that. She's British, but Servant takes place in Philly, so she's perfected her American accent. So she's my lead, and then we've attached Adam Scott, who's he's actually like a comedy actor. He was on Parks and Recreation and some other Step Brothers and some other really stupid, funny movies, American movies. But he's also like a very good dramatic actor, so we have attached him. And then we've attached this woman, Kate Bosworth, who has been steadily making films, but she was best known for her kind of breakout film, which was like a teenage girl surfing movie called Blue Crush. And so it's an interesting, you know, it's like very talented people who have who are visible, but not necessarily these gigantic superstars, which is also fine because it's not a superstar budget. You know, it's a bigger budget than I've ever worked with, but it's, you know,
an
manageable
film.
It's an independent film.
Exactly.
And then Nick Zinner, who is he's the lead guitarist for that band, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and he did this. Okay. He did this score. He did the soundtrack for Knives and Skin, and so he's going to do the score for this one. I loved working with him.
No, it was amazing. I mean, like your music, the music is like so interesting, and we wanted to ask you that. I mean, the students are like dying to ask some questions. It would be fantastic if we could please have some questions from the students, because I've been sort of. So who wants to ask?
Well, we haven't. You and I haven't spoken for a while, so it was good to catch up.
Hi, fantastic, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time and your generosity to come over.
Yeah. If students have questions, I would be happy to answer anything that they have.
They were asking about the music.
Oh, the music. I see.
Yeah, like your soundtracks and how, because they please. Yeah.
So that's one thing. So the in Knives and Skin, for instance, or even in the other shorts, I mean, there's a difference between like when the characters sing. So there's a bunch of singing, and then there's the score, the sound, the just the background music. And so again, when I have the short films that I've made leading up to Knives and Skin was a place where I wanted to experiment with people singing, to see if if it was an interesting moment, if it had pathos, if it was an emotional trigger, if it was stupid. I didn't want it to be stupid, and so I knew that it was working. Those films, people really responded to the singing in those films, so I wanted to incorporate that with Knives and Skin. And the logistics is that I worked with a company who gets licensing for those songs, and then I worked with a woman who is a singer and a conductor for a chorus exactly. Okay. And I've worked with her over many films, and so she was the one who would rearrange the songs and then teach them to the people who were singing, and then she would always be just off camera, conducting their singing. But
it's covers, which is a great thing, which I think it's very smart. Because it's not like original songs that nobody knows about, and you're using the film to promote the album, blah blah blah. No, it's like a resignification of all these songs in this new context. So I find that great.
And I think the moment that you're listening to a song, you think like, I think I know this song, but it's coming to you through this, like a lullaby or like a lamentation, but my films always have a lot of music. Some people have said too much music. I don't care. I like the music, but I think it goes back to being a dancer.
And to your influences as a teenager, like what music did you hear? Did you listen to?
Well, I mean, I was a teenager in the 80s, and so I was listening to a lot of the music that's in Knives and Skin, this like the Smiths and New Order and Susie and the Banshees, all of this kind of, all of this sort of kind of maybe even specifically sort of like British, like alternative
rock bands.
Yeah, kind of electronic music, but also lots of American hip hop too, but that none of that has made its way yet into the into the films. But no, music when I was a teenager, both as a dancer, who just was like, it was a huge part of my life as a dancer. I mean, that was all classical music. But
you were a ballet dancer. You were a classical dancer. I mean, that's why you like Black Swan so much. Like in your imaginary of references, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was in a version of Swan Lake. I mean, that sort of was like, I was a
dancer.
Dancer.
dancer. Yeah.
And so that was, from a very young age, just this sense of music as a storytelling element was very important. And then, music as a teenager, it's hard now with all my children, to sort of lock myself in my bedroom and listen to music, then they're knocking on the door saying like, we're hungry. But, I still feel like music is very transformative. It's this beautiful human thing, especially people singing, the human voice. I can't sing at all. And I'm so in love with human voices, and the way that you can be in this one mood and then you hear a song that you love and it's just like, oh, you can really unravel and like melt into the song. It's just, music is so powerfully, transformative. And it just, the idea of like telling a story through music, like the way that you can combine image with music in a film just, I love that moment when I'm editing and then I'm like, let's try a song out and let's try some music in here. And then you put the music in, you're like, it's great, or that's not working. Try something else. But I really love that combination of the image and the music. And I think it has a lot to do with being a dancer and thinking about the and the lyrical way of ballet and the moving bodies, through space to music,
and the theatrical and the performative and the rhythm. I don't know. Yes, fantastic. I mean, it's now everything makes sense after listening to you. Quien quiera hacer una pregunta, Jennifer, Jose o Ana.
I'd like to. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jose.
This is Jose. I would really like to know, like, the way sexuality, like, comes with your characters, because, well, I have to say that usually you don't see that much, like, female sexuality portrayed in the way that it is in your films, because I think that there's always, like, a very external point of view of how it should be. But, for example, for me, this is scene of the two girls who were, like, putting things inside of her vagina, and then, like, exchanging those things, that for me was also like kind of another kind of communication. I would like to know, how do you like to, or how is the process for you to like to choose this kind of, I don't know, elements in your character?
I'm so glad you brought up that scene. That's one of my most favorite scenes.
Yeah, mine too.
And it's a scene that has, for a lot of people, it's really like they just get stuck there, not in such a good way, but I'm glad that you got anyway. But I think because of exactly what you asked, because I think in so many films, we're used to seeing, like a very, especially among young people, just kind of heteronormative sexuality. And oftentimes even a problematic heteronormative sexuality where like the boys are like predators, and or the girls are like overly sexualized. It just doesn't feel authentic to me. Or victims. So it feels important that I represent, like the boys who like other boys and the girls who like other girls, or people who don't like anybody, also a kind of asexuality, or just a kind of like, I'm not ready to even think about this yet, but in particular in Knives and Skin, the relationship between those two girls, I wanted to present, especially this one girl who's like that hyper sort of feminine, popular cheerleader, who's got this awful boyfriend, but who really just loves this other girl. And I didn't want their relationship to be a problem. Like I didn't want them to be harassed at school or something, but I wanted it to be something that is their secret, that they get to develop secretly, because I do think that that's how relationships, especially among young people, start at the beginning. You pass notes to each other, I mean, now it's like, maybe you're texting each other, but I was also trying to make it feel a little more analog, so they pass what's like a folded piece of paper first. It's this note, and that's what I wrote in the script. It was a note, but then I thought, God, I want them to keep passing secret messages to each other, but what else would they pass to each other? And so it was like, it took me a minute to think like, well, maybe they're little gifts, little trinkets, I don't know how you would say it, like those little things, right? And then I was thinking also about just the, like these older, maybe Victorian traditions of, lockets, necklaces that have like your lover's hair in it, or just these other, this idea that you would carry
relics, like relics,
and this idea that you would carry something close to your body, knowing that you were going to give it to your lover, and we're a culture that is, I mean, maybe even globally, we're a culture that's obsessed with women, but not always with the specifics of women's bodies.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I want to just make this suggestion that these two girls are like, you know, holding these little trinkets in their bodies to get, you know, to give to their lovers. And that scene was so funny to shoot also because we had the woman who was dealing with the props had gone out to get like it's called glycerin, you know, it's like this clear liquid that she put on all of the things, so they were like kind of wet, right? But there were a couple times that the thing would be handed to someone else and it was just like dripping, you know, and I was like, cut, like it was like, it's too much, that's not, hold on, you know. I mean, we had some really funny moments with that scene, trying to make it seem you know, authentic, as though something had just been removed from someone's body. But also the girls didn't know what they were getting, so they would like the person was passing, my props mistress was passing, you know, like a little flamingo underneath the door, then they would pick it up, and then we recorded that scene with no sound, thankfully, because everyone was giggling, you know, during that whole shoot. And I was far away looking at the monitor, so I could only see like all of a sudden just like something would like rise up, you know, like the flamingo or the, you know, and I would start giggling. And I think that scene is supposed to be, yes, exactly what you're saying, Jose, like this secret language, this secret communication. It's about falling in love. It's about like, it's actually about like being comfortable with your body and intimate. It's like a really intimate scene, but they only ever just like touch hands at the end, you know? And I think being able to portray intimacy in an unexpected way, in an authentic way, right? Because when you're falling in love with someone, you do very particular things, you know, it's very personal, you know, desire is very, very personal, and grief is very personal. So, you know, Knives and Skin is also about grief. And I think that so many films just don't portray desire or grief or these extreme emotions in a very unexpected way, or something that feels very authentic.
Exactly.
That was a long answer. Sorry about that.
No, ¿quién más quiere preguntarle algo, Ana?
I wanted to ask you something. Well, kind of what you were talking about at the beginning when you enter here with us, that it really came to my attention because you said that it looks like it was always very clear to you that you would go to an art school or to a film school, but it's, for me at least, it's not something that it was very common, at least at the 90s. Not many people that would say, okay, I'm a video artist. They didn't go to art schools, they didn't go to film schools, they just took their cameras and shot stuff, and that's how they created their path or their professional career. For the school, and I didn't think of anything that wasn't like going to school to anything before I started school. So how do you think that going specifically to an art school changed your perspective or made your let's say like your vision to grow or to change? Or yeah, I don't know if I'm being too clear about this, but yes, I mean, because I personally learned everything that I know about film in film school, which is either a good or a bad thing. I'm not sure yet, but that's the way that it was for me. And let's say that since you're also kind of shaped for an art school or for a film school, I believe that has something to do with the way that you are seeing your work today, that you're teaching today as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, Anna. And you know, it's interesting, at the time when I ended up at film school or an art school, making films in art school, or making kind of videos more in art school, there were so few, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but there were so few examples of women making like feature-length independent narrative films. So it didn't it honestly didn't so much occur to me like I should go to film school and make films, you know. What I saw instead was this ability to have a video camera and to sort of experiment with the stories I was telling, and that I thought I could kind of find my path that way. I mean, I was still trying to find, you know, women. It was much more so women in, like in Europe. I mean, Chantal Ackerman and Agnes Varda. Even it wasn't until I saw this film by Allison Anders, this really great American independent film called Gas, Food, and Lodging, that I thought, oh, and I didn't even know that woman, but I thought like, oh, a woman directed that film. That's so cool. Or when I saw Daughters of the Dust, this beautiful film by Julie Dash, I thought, wow, a woman directed that. That's so incredible. And that's like a real film that she made. I mean, you are so lucky to be in a place where, you know, it's like you have lots of examples of these, you know, women sort of across the whole world who are, you know, it doesn't even occur to you that that's not something that you know, could do or would do. And I look back and I wish that I had gone to film school, because, you know, teaching yourself how to write a script or teaching yourself how to direct actors it's hard, you know, but I did, but I, you know, I mean, you learn however you learn anyway. So maybe I would have been exactly where I am right now if I had gone to a traditional, conventional film school. But I liked the idea, but I also like the idea of not being beholden to like a commercial end product, you know? So I get asked to, you know, here in Chicago still there's Columbia College, that's a pretty traditional film school, or Northwestern. And I've, you know, done visiting, you know, class visits at NYU and UCLA, and those are really, you know, those are fantastic film schools. And I often wonder if those students are encouraged to, you know, tell whatever story they want to tell. I mean, for me, like the storytelling is the most important thing. And, you know, you can always figure out how to run the camera, you know, or you can find someone who knows how to run the camera, or you can figure those things out nowadays, you know, but to be a good storyteller is not always something that you can learn necessarily, you know? And so that's, you know, some days I look back and I think, oh gosh, you know, I wish I had gone to film school. This would be maybe easier if I knew.
But screenwriting, I mean, the screenwriting, have you like trained with other screenwriters in workshops, or was that also something that you learned on your own?
Yeah, I learned it on my own with like a bunch of like very goofy books, you know, like there's a book that gets published every year that's called the Screenwriter's Bible. I mean, it's very, it's not a bad book, but it's like very conventional, you know? And there's this other book that gets made fun of in the Spike Jonze movie adaptation. It's a book called Story that Robert McKee wrote. That, I mean, I was like this nerd at the library, you know, checking out all of these screenwriting books, just trying to figure out like what the form of it was, how to develop characters. I mean, I just did it. And then I just started writing scripts. And now at my university, I teach a screenwriting class, which is sort of funny because I really have not ever been mentored by someone else, but I read a lot of other people's scripts now, you know, because I get sent scripts to direct. And what I've found is everybody writes in a very different way. I mean, everybody, it's the characters section is where it's supposed to be and the dialogue is where it's supposed to be in terms of the form, but everybody's script is a little different in how they like to write action and how they, you know, introduce characters. And so I think that even if you've gone to a traditional screenwriting program, I think it's very important to sort of develop your own voice as the writer on the page. Yeah, that's it. Robert McKee, that story. I mean, it's a really conventional book, but it helped me a lot.
So how long does it take for you to write a script like this Perpetrator screenplay? I mean, how many revisions? I mean, since the beginning of the story, when you first had it in your hands, I mean, was it yours original? Is it yours original? Is it original story? And then you start working on it and working on it. How long does the whole process took you?
It was maybe a year ago that I had an initial conversation with the Paris-based producer, who was the first one to say, what do you want to work on next? I want to help you make what you want to work on. And originally I had just said, I want to do a kind of a coming of age cat people, which is also like a really nuanced, you know, kind of shapeshifter story that's been made twice. There was one that was made in the 40s and one that was made in the 80s.
Cat people?
Cat people.
Okay. So we know the musical. We've heard about it. But
Well, no, maybe that's Cats, right? But Cat People.
Oh, Cats. Yeah. Cat People is a film.
Yeah, Cat People's a film.
Okay,
it's an actual film. No, it's okay. But it's a very nuanced kind of shapeshifter film. I mean, they're both iterations are really corny, but I like the idea of a shapeshifter. Anyway, so he said, that's great. I love this idea. And so just as I was holding up that notebook before, like I just started writing notes, you know, thinking about the general, you know, just the general outline of the story. And normally I start with something that's like visual, and then it's sort of the story kind of spirals out. I never just sit down and say fade in and then it goes, I just write it linearly. I kind of write it scene by scene and then start attaching those scenes together. And so I usually
images, scenes, it's scene, and then you break down and work on the dialogues. And I mean, that's
it's not a linear. It's really not a linear process, and it starts off with just lots of notebooks of handwritten notes. Yeah, or even just this idea of like, you know, I wanted to write something about a shape-shifting teenage girl because I've been asked so often, you know, like how hard is it to work with so many teenage girls, you know, because so many of my films feature lots of actual teenage girls. And so I realized, you know, and people would say, oh gosh, wasn't it awful to work with so many young girls? And I was like, I realized that the assumption is that the teenage girls are just awful, unbearable beings, you know? And I just thought, God, that's so unfair. And you're saying that in front of you're saying that in front of your own daughter or something, your own child. Like, what is that? At what point do you internalize, right, that idea that you're an unbearable being?
Yes.
And I also, you know, I've also been really intrigued by the kind of myth of the mean girl, you know, and I think that I say myth because I think that mean girls, even mean boys, you know, are like, it's just defensive, you know, I mean, they're at the end of the day, they come together. It's like meanness is a weapon, you know, but there's so many films that are really about a mean girl. And I feel like that's so dismissive, you know. We do it to adult women also, you know, we just call them like bitches, which is totally dismissive, you know. No one, I mean, even though there's all sorts of people who are like, bitch, please, you're a bad bitch, you know, I get it. But that's also a term that still is very stinging. It's still meant to dismiss a woman's agency. And men can be assholes, but you know, like it doesn't dismiss their power, you know.
But they're leaders. Yeah,
they're leaders. Exactly. That's right.
A leadership quality.
Yeah. So then I started thinking about the idea of this shapeshifter girl who sort of, whose parents think she's wild and unbearable. And then she kind of becomes wild, you know, in her shape-shifting. And so based on just that idea, you know, I was thinking, okay, we're going to be introduced to this character where she's this teenage girl who's like, you know, doing a lot of shoplifting, and she's like having a lot of sex, and she's really totally free, you know. But her dad, her single father, like he can't take it. He can't take her autonomy. And so he sends her to live with her grandmother, you know, thinking that will, you this very tough, mean grandmother will
smooth her
out. Well, the reality is
her.
that the grandmother is also a shapeshifter, and so then, and on her 18th birthday, she inherits this shapeshifting ability, which actually is really aligns with, at first it's really uncomfortable for her, which I imagine it would be. That's another moment where I'm not a shapeshifter, so I had to think like, wow, what if you woke up and you had these kind of power? I love movies about superheroes where they're very uneasy about their powers at first, or uncomfortable with their powers,
and then they're sort of
and they have to sort of wobble through like what they're doing. Like I just was watching one of the Spider-Man movies with my kids, and there's the one that with Tom Holland, and there's so many funny moments where he just can't get the web right, and it's really,
that's great.
I mean, those are very big, Hollywood movies, but those scenes are so funny and human. And anyway, but then it couldn't just be that. It couldn't just be like, well, then she turns 18 and she has this thing that happened, she inherits this shape-shifting ability. There had to be some other kind of a plot change, which is what I kind of learned from reading those books, right? You can't just, even the most subtle, drifty film, has to have these things that shift and change, or things that influence a character. I mean, I love slow-paced films. I love, these like, Lost in Translation, or some of the Harmony Korine films, or, so Chantal Akerman, so many other like European films, and it's a really drifty plot, but things do happen.
But very few things, right?
Right.
Slowly.
I mean, but still, it's like, it's like watching your background, it's like the wind is influencing, the tree behind you. And, I mean, there's lots of narrative in the background that's happening behind you, but it's not like something has come flying into the background and exploded. Right. So, but it is a matter of like writing in these moments, these events that influence your character, that push your character. And sometimes that's internal, right? It's something that's like an internal thing that's happening within your character. And then sometimes it's external. It's another character. It's another, event. But I didn't start putting all of those notes into a script form until like maybe early November, so almost a year ago. And then in April, so that's 6 months or something, I had a script that we were ready to send out to cast. So it was about like 6 months from just a pile of notes to then putting it into script form, and then revising and filling it out, taking things out, putting things in, to where it was like readable, where all the characters were there, where the plot was there, the arcs were there.
And do you read it out to your family? I mean, like for your kids or something, or is it just like
I'll say
to yourself?
Yeah, I read it to myself. I mean, it's the funny thing is like my kids have almost no interest in what I'm doing. No, I mean, like when Knives and Skin first came out onto Hulu, like I could use the remote control and just say Knives and Skin into my remote, and then that would pop up on my TV, and I was like, look, and they were like,
oh, Mom.
Yeah, please, really? Mom. So embarrassing, So, but it's cool. It actually keeps, it's totally fine. But no, I have, the French producer used to be, before he was a sales agent, he used to give notes on scripts. So I would just send him drafts. And he would send me these great notes. And then I would send it to I have, a small group of people who I trust, and, who can give me really good constructive notes. And so that's what I did. But and then with Perpetrator, I did the same thing with Knives and Skin too. So it's not totally in this bubble. There's people who see it.
You need You need an exchange of some sort, a dialogue, a creative dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we started attaching the cast, then I was able to see, oh, Nell is this character. Oh, Kate is this character. Adam is this character. So what I did recently was I hadn't touched the script at all since April. But I was also making some more revisions, and I had some good notes that had come from 30 West and come from Divide and Conquer. So I just went in a couple of weeks ago and made all those revisions.
And incorporated some things, but also always like a non-negotiable. I mean, like, is it like, because I mean, how do you balance that? I think that's an art, because of course you want to please everyone. You know, a part of you wants to sort of, okay, let's do this together. It's our ideas, blah, blah. But how do you measure? You know, it's a thin line, I think, no?
Well, I think you're right. And I think you know, I mean, for me, I think about it, right? So the people, when I got notes recently from 30 West and Divide and Conquer, you know, there were some notes that I loved. I was like, oh, that's great. That's really smart. And then others I was like, I don't agree with that, you know? And so then I'm not beholden to make those changes. They're not withholding money, you know?
Extortion?
No.
Blackmailing, you know?
And, you know, I just had a conversation with the guys at Divide and Conquer yesterday who like said, oh, I love the new, you know, the new revisions are really great. And I know they're not just saying that, you know, it's so nice to hear. I mean, we all love to hear that. We all love to hear, like, it's perfect. You're doing great. It's hard. I mean, I hate hearing it's not working. Oh, it's like, it's awful. I hate hearing that. But I also know when it's not working. I feel like I've gotten to a point where I know when something is not working also. So sometimes having someone say that is, you know, you're like, okay, I'm going to go back in and fix it. But it was so nice to hear that they liked the revisions. And, you know, the people who are, you know, Nell and Kate and Adam, you know, they get scripts sent to them all the time. And all three of them just said, this is such a unexpected script. It's so, you know, it feels really unique and special. And that's really meaningful to me also, because they read so many scripts, you know, and for them to really respond to mine and have it feel unique, and they want to be part of it as actors, they want to bring themselves to it, just like blows my mind. I'm a terrible actor. I'm so in awe of people who can, you know, like just go into the skin of a character. I'm just totally in awe of that ability, and being able to write lines of dialogue that then when you hear someone else say it, I'm such an emotional director. I get really teary. I get like I cry on set, not because I'm upset, like tears of joy, like, oh, that was beautiful. That was incredible. I get lost sometimes. They're like, you know, I'm like, I forget to say cut, you know, it's like, I really just get lost in the moment of the performance. I don't know, so far no one, that's not freaked anyone out. You know, I think it's that I have sometimes emotional response to what's happening. You know, it's a good because thing, I know that it's working, and I know that will translate onto the screen. There were so many times when we were doing Knives and Skin, especially during the singing, when everybody was sobbing. I mean, even like these big burly, like the like you know, the G&E guys, the electrical, you know, the big, were sobbing, you know, just like listening to these girls sing these songs. It was very cool.
What happened to those girls? I mean, what are they working on? Do they get so attached to the film, or that doesn't happen? What happens to, I mean,
well, you know, what was super cool. Well, and everybody we cast out of Chicago. So Chicago has this incredible theater scene, you know, Steppenwolf Theater, which is just this, you know, 4 of the adults that are in Knives and Skin are Steppenwolf ensemble members. I mean, just incredible theater. I mean, you know, so many filmmakers do.
John Malkovich is from.
Yes, of course. Yeah. That's, and a lot of filmmakers just don't. They have heard this myth that theater actors they act too. It's too big of a performance. I don't agree. I think theater people and even improvisational comedians are such good dramatic actors. And so anyway, we cast Knives and Skin entirely out of the theater community in Chicago, including all those young people. And it was actually the very last day that we were shooting most of the principal dialogue, and it was one of the football game scenes, and all the young people were in that scene. And so but we would shoot, it was crazy. They would shoot but they were not all in a scene together. They were all in the bigger scene. But what I realized is that, you know, we would finish with 2 people, let's say, and I was like, okay, you know, Kayla and Emma are wrapped, you know, you're done for the film, yay. And they would go change out of their costumes, but then come back. And that happened to each one of them. They each stayed until they were all wrapped. It was
like
crazy.
The story continued.
No, yeah, because I was like, why are you still here? Like, why, you know, because we shot that scene until like 2 a.m. and I was like, why are you all still here? And they're like, well, because, you know, they're not done yet. And so it was like they totally had this like beautiful bonding around the film. It was very cool. And I think they've stayed friends, but, you know, they went on to do, they're all busy doing, you know, super cool things. And the woman, the African American kind of goth punk girl, Irion, she's in the new Candyman. So Nia DaCosta, along with Jordan Peele, remade Candyman, that kind of classic 80s scary movie. And she's in it. And I think that she's been in a couple other films. So I feel like she's going to just take off. But a lot of the other younger people came to Chicago and stayed in Chicago because they want to do theater. So they've been continuing to do mostly theater.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, ¿alguien tiene otra pregunta para Jennifer? Ana María, you have a question. No te oímos. Puedes encender. Tan raro.
Sí.
Tan raro. ¿Hay algún problema con tu mic?
Ana María,
puedes
yo sí te estoy
escribirla.
escuchando, no sé si los otros.
No, yo. Ah, ¿tú sí la oyes, José?
Sí.
No. Do you hear her, Jen? No. No. Ana, tan raro que no te oímos. So, what did you think about this film in Netflix, the last one from thinking about ways of, God, I forgot this one. What's the name? Ending of things. Ending things? Thinking of
I'm
ways
thinking of ending things.
I'm thinking of ending things. Yeah,
right,
that kind of aesthetic.
Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, Charlie Kaufman.
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. No,
okay.
But I really love Charlie Kaufman. I mean, the way that he writes.
The absurd.
So
I was thinking
clever.
about the absurd.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But I've missed. There's so many things it's on my list of things to watch. But that's one of them. So I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
Okay. And there's this other one, Cuties, that's like super controversial. What about that? I mean, like representing sexuality, talking about that.
I thought Cuties was great. Great. And I thought that, you know, the controversy around it was absolutely, you know,
unfair,
ridiculous, totally ridiculous. And very, you know, so close-minded. You know, I mean, there's so many horrible American TV shows that are about, you know, girls in beauty pageants and, you know, like Honey Boo Boo and Toddlers and Tiaras. I mean, they're kind of guilty pleasure shows, but you know, they're super popular and nobody thought that those were, you know, exploiting girls, you know, young girls' sexuality. But then there's this one scene that gets released from Cuties and everybody just goes, all these Christian women go crazy without having seen the film, which is so much
feminists too, right?
Or right.
This group of feminists, like super.
Yeah.
You're like, what's, you know,
right. And without seeing the whole film, you know, that scene that was released was totally out of
context.
Yeah. And even if you watched that scene that was released closely, you can see, you know, when that scene cuts to the audience is like, you know, just within that scene, you can tell that there's, so it was just, but I thought it was a lovely film. And I thought that, you know, that filmmaker is you know, so cool and thoughtful. And, you know, and some of it had to do with also the way that Netflix promoted the film. So if you saw the poster, the French poster for that film, it was like these girls with their backpacks and they look like schoolgirls. And then the poster that Netflix released was like all of them in their dance costumes, all in kind of sexy poses. So it was also, you know, Netflix did a disservice to that filmmaker. I mean, I think that's also something interesting to think about, you know, like you want to have this experience with your film. You want it to be released in a wide audience, but you know, if you're dealing with a corporate entity like Netflix, you might not have say over what your promotion materials look like, right? And you might all of a sudden like open up your email one morning to all of this
hate mail
and realize like that's not what my film is. That's not how I wanted to represent my film. I mean, I didn't have that experience with Knives and Skin. With IFC, who distributed my film, I had final say over the trailer that was released. I had final say over the posters that were released, and I really loved them. Even the French distributor made this beautiful French poster, and they actually released a vinyl record, of a promotional vinyl record of part of the soundtrack to like French press to get them to, you know, write about the film. And but they were sending me, you know, images that they were going to use in the poster, and I think that's not very common. You know, I feel really thankful that I had that had that input too.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps one last question. Ana Maria, ahora sí. Do you hear her? I don't. Okay.
I don't hear her.
I don't hear her neither.
Unless she's trying to communicate to like with her mind.
Yeah.
I'm bad at this. I already said I'm not good at this. I can't.
I don't know why.
You could write it in the chat.
Yeah, ¿por qué no lo escribes, Ana? Mute, ask to unmute, and then I asked to unmute, but it's not working. It's so strange. Okay, how did you come across magical realism? So why do you define your work as magical realism? Exactly. Okay.
You know, it's interesting. I think so, you know, I feel like that's actually in Latin American cinema, it sort of starts there, you know.
And in literature, with Garcia Marquez and all this.
That's right. And so, you know, I was working at a movie theater in Columbus, Ohio, and I remember seeing, and I was a teenager, and I was watching, or maybe I was older than that, but I was I mean, still like a young person, not so in thinking about the history of film, and I saw for Like Water for Chocolate.
Okay.
And you know, I just was so taken by that film, and it's not a film that's like the pinnacle of magical realism, but it has some elements of that in there, and absolutely in Latin American literature. And so I you know, was like, again, it's like something that you immediately are drawn to, and you have a crush on. And it was like nothing I had seen in any American sort of conventional independent film. You know, I mean, there's a history of surrealist film and history of maybe American experimental film, you know, and certainly there's, you know, in you know, Bergman or Fellini, you know, I mean, that's more surrealism than like magical realism. But it had a lot to do with, you know, being sort of introduced to it through you know, through Latin American literature and film.
And perhaps humor.
A little
bit of your humor probably coincides there too.
Yeah.
You know. Jose, ¿alguien quiere comentarle algo a Jennifer?
I have another question. ¿Nadie tiene otra pregunta? Para no hacer tantas preguntas.
Gracias, Jose. Sí, we are we are very thankful of having you, and listening to you. It's been a pleasure. So thank you so much. So Jose, you wanna make a sí, adelante.
Okay. I was really intrigued about the fact that you. I mean, we watched White Trash Girl. I really like this idea of like building a narrative around this whole dramatic melodrama, and I would like to know if like what kind of things inspire you back then, because I don't know, sometimes in film schools like or in other academic environments, I don't know, I feel it that way, we are like taught about like these kind of films that are not like very much narrative or very much like mainstream, to say it like in a way. And I would like to know how, because I think that there are a lot of things to learn from that. For example, I don't know, telenovelas that are like these very dramatic things that we have in Latin America. So I'd like to know what were you watching back then, or what inspired you to like introduce all of that?
That's such a good question. And, it was a kind of a combination of some performative early video art, or even someone like Guillermo Gomez Peña.
Yeah, Guillermo.
Do you know
Gomez
this
Peña.
this
Yeah,
character?
we've seen that. Yeah,
this character that he was, and Coco Fusco. They did that couple in a cage performance.
Couple in a cage, yes.
They. I mean, and so these I really was interested in performance art where people were kind of taking on a persona, like a super cultural persona, or taking on the most problematic aspects or the most stereotypical aspects of their persona. Like Guillermo Gomez Peña, he would be like Doritos, Fritos, or whatever. Like just this kind of language that was not even Spanish. It was like this not even English or whatever, and with this kind of quasi like S&M, but also kind of Aztec. I don't know. It was like beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So it was some of that kind of performance, or even like Karen Finley, Carolee Schneemann, these like performance artists who were developing these persona, but also like Wonder Woman, and like comic books. I mean, when I wanted to make White Trash Girl, I set out to make something that felt like a live action comic book. And I had also found at maybe like a thrift store in Chicago at that time, there was like an Italian kind of a comic book, but it wasn't drawn, it was pictures. So, and it was kind of like that, like a book version of like a telenovela. And I just thought, oh, that's so, just this idea of like developing a superhero character, but
real,
but that was like kind of, that looked like it was kind of coming off of the pages of a comic book or something. And fast forward to right now, I actually keep getting sent graphic novels to adapt, so it's kind of come full circle where I'm way behind reading. If you could see the stack of books, beyond this, of like graphic novels that I've been asked to consider adapting, for a film. And even when we were doing Knives and Skin, there's this beautiful comic series called Paper Girls, which is, we looked at for kind of a color inspiration for Knives and Skin. But yeah, I was looking at a lot of kind of melodramatic, performative characters from Guillermo Gomez Peña to Wonder Woman.
Fantastic. Great. Buenísima pregunta, Jose. That's a great question too.
And I think it's like, and I think that the last thing is like, the video data bank. I mean, it's not, a lot of that stuff, they still have it. You can look at clips from Couple in a Cage, but it's also like that time in the kind of 60s, 70s, and 80s was like, what was so cool is that those video cameras went into the hands of so many people who were just trying to reinvent their own image, so it was like, Latinx activists, it was like Black activists. It was not just like this domination of like you know, white guys who were just making all the work. Video was really this place where it belonged to everybody, and everybody like co-opted it and was able to like reinvent their own image, you know, which felt so powerful. So if
refreshing,
you look at, so refreshing. I mean, and I think it allowed for, you know, so much more kind of expression, you know, but if you look at, it was a real kind of a renaissance of identity politics, you know, that was really playful and fun and funny and absurd and
because you use a lot of material from popular culture, television, series and all that, and you sort of remake into this new subjectivity that's around. So I think that's why it's so so funny, and at the same time, so it talks about other things, right? About it's,
and I'm still interested in popular culture, you know. I mean, I'm still sort of like addicted to my Instagram feed and seeing what what the Kardashians are up to, even though it's, you know, it's like it's bad for my soul some days. It's like eating candy, you know. But I'm still interested in as a filmmaker, you know, popular culture and popular images, and transforming those images, and realizing that, you know, that I, as a filmmaker, it's my responsibility also to represent a more wide and authentic group of people, you know. So for instance, and this is, I know we have to wrap up, but you know, the friends of Charlotte, the African-American girl in Knives and Skin, you know, like she's got this, like the girl in the suit is, you know, like April Martinez, you know, she's like her little sort of like punky Latinx friend. And then she's got this friend who's got hijab, you know, like this sort of like, you know, her Muslim friend. And those I don't mean to be, I didn't want those to feel tokenistic, you know, or like caricatures. But living in Chicago, you know, I mean, Chicago is this really vibrantly diverse city, you know, like my students, I have so many hijabi students. I have so many Latinx students. Like, so when I'm looking out to the sea of young people who I'm inspired by to make films with, about, that's who I see. And knowing that there are so few films that really reflect back on those communities, you know, it's really important. The first time that you see yourself in a film, it's very impactful. So, anyway, look out for, you know, Perpetrator.